Hey guys, tonight we're not chasing war, or kings, or bloody battlefields. This is a different kind of story. One that starts in silence, in straw, in the slow breath of a medieval cottage after dark. It's about the people no one wrote poems about. The villagers, the mothers, the workers who lay on wooden boards and found, somehow, the best sleep in human history. Long before alarms and blue light, there was a rhythm. A first sleep, then waking, then second sleep. A strange and gentle routine lost to time. No clocks, no pills, no sleep hacks, just bodies worn down by toil, finding rest the way nature intended. So dim the lights, let your thoughts quiet, and step with me into the stillness of a medieval night. You're not tired. Not really. Just sore in all the places people shouldn't be sore unless they've fought a wild boar or lost a tavern brawl, which you haven't. You just spent your day hauling buckets of water from a stream that hates you, collecting kindling sharp enough to draw blood, and twisting ropes with your bare hands like some peasant-themed gym rat. Medieval fitness isn't optional. It's called survival. Still, here you are, not asleep. Which, shockingly, doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It's the 14th century, and beefasicia is just how things work. First sleep, then wakefulness, then second sleep. Like a sandwich, but instead of ham, it's cold toes, and the creeping awareness that the roof might collapse on you one day. Around you, your family is dead asleep in one large wheezing heap. Your father snores like a clogged bellows. Your sister mutters into the dog. Someone just farted and you don't have the energy to accuse anyone. The blanket is damp, the mattress is straw. You shift and something bites your calf. You choose not to investigate. Congratulations. You've entered the watching hour, that magic middle of the night pause when peasants stare into the darkness and try not to scream. Modern people would call it insomnia and throw money at sleep consultants. You light a rush candle, sit up, and try to remember if rats like ears. The fire is barely smoldering now, casting twitchy shadows on the dirt wall. It smells like wet sheep, old stew, and whatever your cousin tracked in on his boots. You pull a rough wool cloak over your shoulders and shuffle out past the tangle of sleeping limbs and chickens. The floor greets your feet with all the warmth of a slab of raw turnip. You creak open the door. Outside, the village is silent, blanketed in a darkness so thick it feels personal. This isn't your city night with a hint of moonlight darkness. This is, if I fall in the well, no one will find me until spring. Darkness. The stars glint overhead, smug and freezing. You sit on the bench beside the door if you can call 3 uneven planks and a nail a bench and let the cold do its worst. Your breath fogs in front of you. Somewhere, a cow is having dreams. You hear the clatter of a baker, already kneading dough like he's fighting a demon. Someone coughs. A bucket tips over. The world isn't awake exactly, but it's twitching. They say this hour is peaceful, that monks use it to pray, that minds feel clearest just after first sleep. Your mind mostly feels cold and itchy, but sure maybe spiritual clarity is just frostbite for the soul. Your mother joins you, wrapped in a shawl that smells like onions and chimney smoke. She doesn't say a word. She just exhales like a tired ox and stares into the night with you, as if hoping it'll blink first. Nothing really happens during this hour, and that's the point. There's no pressure, no scrolls to read, no goats to wrangle. Just you, your thoughts, and the slow hiss of your skin freezing off. It's oddly nice, in a you'll probably lose a toe but gain perspective kind of way. The firelight inside flickers violently for a moment, catching the soot-lined edges of your one-room cottage like a brief and judgmental spotlight. It illuminates everything you already knew was wrong. The cracked beams, the half-collapsed thatch roof, the mouse dragging what looks like a sock toward its den. It's home. Terrible, flammable home. Eventually, you head back in. Carefully. You step over a sibling, accidentally kick the dog, knock into the firewood stack, no one wakes. Everyone's too tired or too cold to care. You slide back into the itchy folds of the family blanket swamp. Your body groans like an old cart axle. No sleep app. No mattress commercial telling you your life will change with extra lumbar support. Just you, your 700-year-old straw mattress, and whatever creatures live in it now. You're probably their landlord. You'd evict them, but the paperwork is imaginary. You fall asleep again. Not because you meditated, not because you journaled or visualized a meadow, but because your body simply gives up. Somewhere between the creaks of the roof and the faint moan of someone's digestive regret, second sleep takes you. And, weirdly, you'll wake up rested. As if 2 sleeps with a freezing intermission is exactly what you needed. You'll wake up groggy, yes, but groggy with purpose. Flea-bitten, but determined. Not exactly happy, but alive. People in the future will forget this. They'll invent pills and routines and glowing sleep headbands. They'll schedule 8-hour sleep windows like they're catching a train. They'll call your perfectly normal midnight stare off a sleep disorder. But not you. You're just a tired peasant. Cold, itchy, mildly gassy, but weirdly okay. Because medieval sleep wasn't broken. Just everything else was. And this, tragically, was the easiest part of your day. Tomorrow comes early, and when it does, there are full buckets, frozen paths, and no toilet in sight. But long before that moment, before the sun rises, before the smell returns, before your knees pop like old furniture, you will wake again. Because this night isn't over. And your sleep? It's only half finished. The fire crackles. The cold deepens. And somewhere in your bones, the second act of your rest waits patiently. You don't remember ever learning this rhythm. It was never taught, never spoken of as a rule. It was just how things were. You went to sleep after sundown and woke again in the dead of night. And everyone else you knew did the same. But centuries from now, people will forget this. They'll forget that sleep came in 2 acts, not 1. That you once had a stretch of calm between your dreams, a space to breathe, to think, to simply be. Historians in the far future will call it segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep, and they'll marvel at how common it once was across villages, cities, even entire countries. They'll pore over records, court documents, personal journals, and suddenly notice the same strange pattern repeating over and over again. Someone wakes up after first sleep, tends to the animals, says their prayers, speaks with their spouse, and then returns for their second sleep. These aren't isolated notes. They're everywhere. A French physician in the 1500s writes about patients who naturally wake in the middle of the night for an hour or 2. An English woman in the 17th century complains that her husband is too fond of first sleep and not enough of second. Italian farmers, German monks, Spanish scholars, all of them living by the same rhythm. Sleep, wake, sleep again. And this time, between the 2 sleeps, it was never wasted. It was yours. The church encouraged midnight prayer. They said the soul was closest to God in those quiet, in-between hours. Families used it for intimacy couples, lying together in the soft candlelight, far from the burden of chores and daylight. Others told stories, pondered dreams, even visited neighbors. There are accounts of women rising to sew or mend, of men writing by firelight. Some simply sat in silence, listening to the creak of the wood and the quiet ticking of their thoughts. It wasn't strange. It wasn't insomnia. It was as natural as breathing. No one had yet invented a world that demanded you sleep like a machinate uninterrupted hours, or else you're broken. No one had sold you blackout curtains or pills or productivity hacks. You didn't track REM cycles. You didn't need to. Your sleep came when the sun went down, and when your body was ready, it released you for a while so you could wander, pray, reflect, whisper, and then, just as naturally, it drew you back into dreams. The fire is still crackling beside you. The night hasn't ended. You're only passing through the middle of it, like a boat drifting on a calm river. You stretch and yawn. Outside, frost coats the edges of the window. In this little gap between rests, you feel oddly awake, like your mind has slipped out from under the weight of the day. You're not groggy. You're alert. And there's no rush to fall asleep again. No guilt, no judgment. Just the night, and you, and the strange comfort of being exactly where you're meant to be. Some future scholar, Roger Kirchdale, uncover this forgotten truth in the archives. In 2001, he'll publish research based on over 500 historical references to first and second sleep. Letters, medical texts, diaries, court depositions, each one a breadcrumb pointing back to a world that had long since slipped into the dark. They'll realize this pattern was not a fluke. It wasn't local. It was global, universal. And it began to disappear not because people changed, but because the world around them did. Soon, the cities will glow. Lamps will fill the streets. Oil, gas, and eventually electricity will pour light into every hour of the day. Factories will demand round-the-clock labor. Clocks will slice time into rigid blocks. The idea of waking at midnight will shift from sacred to strange. But that's still years away. Right now, you're here in the middle of your night, not broken or restless, but simply alive, resting in a forgotten rhythm, a quieter kind of time. This is the sleep that once belonged to everyone, and while the world may someday forget it, your body remembers. The first sleep has ended, the second has not begun. And in this space, between something ancient lives, not just silence, not just thought, but light small, flickering, vital light. You kneel by the hearth, fingers outstretched. The coals are warm but fading, curled in their own smoke. The fire is not dead. It is waiting, just like you. You add a sliver of wood. Not too much fuel is precious, but just enough. The flame accepts your offering with a sigh. It rises, reaches, and begins to stretch its arms toward the corners of the room. You don't think about the chemistry of combustion. You don't know the word oxygen. You simply know the dance, the heat, the way flame answers to breath and hunger. This moment, this act of waking the fire, is not just survival. It is ritual. It is memory passed from hand to hand, mother to child, farmer to daughter. It is the thin line between warmth and cold, life and stillness, light and the void that presses in from every wall. You rise, slowly. The fire casts gold across the rough walls, across the faces of your sleeping family. You move through the dark with care, as if the house itself is alive, and it is. Every beam groans, every reed rustles, every board creaks with stories. You reach for the rushlight, a slender reed dipped in grease, hardened by time. You light it from the hearth, and suddenly the flame moves with you. It flickers like a companion. You walk it across the room like a tether to the waking world. This is not a world of brightness. This is a world where light is always earned. There are no overhead bulbs, no switches, no buttons, just wicks, wax, oil, smoke. You live among shadows. You breathe soot like incense. Every inch of light is labor. Every hour of brightness a debt paid in preparation. You remember making these lights, the slow boil of animal fat, the stink that clung to your skin for hours, the twisting of linen into cords, the dipping, the cooling, the trimming. There is no convenience here, only necessity. The rich speak of beeswax clean burning, sweet-smelling, golden and smooth. But you have never held such a candle. You've seen them, maybe, in the church, in the hands of priests. But not here. Not where the cold creeps through the cracks and the tallow clings to your fingertips. Still, the light is enough. It glows. It guides. It makes you feel less alone in the night. And you are not alone. you never are. Because beyond the fire and the rushlight, beyond the thatch and timber, others are waking too. In neighboring homes, the same dance is unfolding. A log on the fire, a child shifting under wool, a woman standing by the window watching her breath cloud the glass. This is the hour where life moves slowly, where light is not for seeing, but for being. Sometimes you sit with your father in this hour. He carves wood by firelight, hands steady despite the dark. The soft scrape of knife against branch becomes a kind of lullaby. He says little, but you don't need words. The glow between you is enough. Sometimes your mother speaks prayers, not loud, just enough for the night to hear. Her lips move, her eyes closed, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm of an old chant. You don't ask her what it means. You know that not all light is made of flame. In this world, even shadows are familiar. They stretch across your floor like tired friends. They curl beneath your table and climb your walls. You do not fear them not in this hour. They remind you that the dark is not empty. It is full of memory, of warmth, of slow, sacred time. Your brother told you once that shadows are how fire breathes. You liked that. You still do. There are nights when the moon offers her own light, cold but generous. She slides across the fields in silver silence, painting your walls with soft edges. On those nights, you don't light the rushlight. You let the moon do her work. And on rare night-showy nights, your family lights 2 candles. You remember once, during the harvest feast, when your father allowed the second to burn long past midnight. The room glowed like a chapel. You could see every corner, every crack, every grain of the floor. It felt like daylight had visited, just for a moment. You stayed awake for hours that night. Not because you had to, because you could. Because light like that was precious, and you didn't want to miss a single flicker. Now, back at the hearth, you stir the fire once more. The flame is strong now, confident. The room is warmer. Your breath no longer shows in the air. Your sister shifts under the blanket, but does not wake. You sit for a while, rushlight in hand, watching the glow curve and bend. You think about the stories told by firelight, the promises made, the fears confessed. Light does that. It softens us, makes us human again. In the future, people will write about this hour. They will marvel at how little you had, and how much you did with it. They'll write essays on photoperiodism and sleep regulation. They'll call your fire a symbol of resilience, your candle a metaphor for memory. They'll study the patterns in your wakefulness and assign it a name. Segmented sleep, as if it was a design, a prescription. But you don't know that name. You only know the feeling. The comfort of a dim room, the warmth of a shared flame, the hush of a night that doesn't demand anything from you. You think of the stories told by grandmothers, about ghosts in the flame, about souls visiting through the smoke, about dreams that live in the ashes until morning. You don't believe all of it, but you don't need to. The fire tells its own story. And so, when your eyes grow heavy again, you do not panic. You do not reach for more light. You let the rushlight burn a little longer. You place another stick on the fire. You slide beneath the blanket once more. And as the flame flickers behind your eyelids, you feel yourself drifting. Not falling, drifting. Back into second sleep. Back into the night's soft cradle. Back into a world that breathes not by the hour, but by the glow. And outside, the stars keep watch, and the fire waits for your return. Your second sleep hasn't come yet. You lie there, eyes half shut, listening to the quiet pop of the fire as it clings to its last breath. The warmth under the blanket is fading. One more log, that's all you need. You reach over and feed the embers with care, watching as sparks rise and dance in the smoke-stained air above you. This light is all you have. There are no lamps humming in corners, no street lights burning outside your window, just the hush of the dark, the faint pulse of fire, and the moon if you're lucky. Here, your nights are built out of flickers and shadows. In your world, darkness is not the enemy. It's a fact of life-thick, constant, and absolute. When the sun sets, it takes nearly everything with it. Your cottage becomes a cave. The outlines of your family fade into silhouettes. Your breath, your steps, your chorizo everything slows. The day belongs to labor, the night belongs to stillness. Unless, of course, you can afford to push the dark back. In this village, very few can. Candles are not the warm little luxuries the future will know. They are tallow made from animal fat, smoky, greasy, and smelling faintly of meat. You make your own when you can. Melted fat, twisted linen, a little soot. They don't last long. A candle that burns for 4 hours is a treasure, and lighting one without reason is a waste. Rushlights are cheaper. A dried reed dipped in grease, burned like a matchstick, but they sputter and flicker. They blacken the walls and fill the room with a thick, bitter smell. Still, for many homes, it's all there is. Oil lamps are rarer still. If you're lucky, you have one clay or iron, filled with fish oil or rendered lard. The wick floats and smokes as it burns, casting a weak, wobbling flame no brighter than a dying star. You live your evenings by firelight and habit. You learn to see in shadows. You learn to listen more than look. In towns, it's not much better. A few torches on walls, a lantern swinging from a doorway. Even by the 1300s, most city streets are unlit unless it's a festival or a funeral. The night is a veil, and stepping into it is an act of faith. That's why people don't just stay up. It isn't a choice, it's a constraint. You follow the sun because there's nothing else to follow. Your entire life moves around its rise and fall. The rooster crows at dawn. You work until the light disappears. You sleep not because you're tired, but because the world goes black. In wealthy homes, it's a different story. Nobles burn beeswax candles cleaner, sweeter, expensive. They line their chambers with tapestries and chandeliers. Their evenings stretch longer. They entertain, dine, read aloud. But even they know limits. A single beeswax candle could cost half a day's wages. No one burns one without thought. This isn't just inconvenience, it's structure. It shapes how you live. When you wake in the night between your first and second sleep, you do not light the whole house. You might nurse a bit of fire, maybe one rushlight, nothing more. You don't fight the dark. You live alongside it. And the dark, in return, teaches you to rest. Future centuries will call your nights unproductive. They'll invent clocks and schedules. They'll treat sleep like a factory, shift something to compress and optimize. They'll flood the streets with gaslight in the early 1800s, then wires and filaments by the 1880s. Cities like Paris and London will glow like bonfires. People will boast that they no longer fear the night, but in doing so, they will forget it. They'll lose the hush, the pause, the natural cue to slow down. Artificial lighting will push bedtimes later. First sleep will begin to vanish. The hour between sleep-sonsi used for prayer, reflection, even poetry will shrink. By the 20th century, it will be almost completely gone, and no one will even remember it was there. But here, in your time, it still exists. You are not restless. You are not broken. You are simply awake when the world expects you to be. Your father told you once that the moon is like a shepherd's lamp, always watching, always just enough. Some nights it's a thin sliver, others a golden plate. But its constant unlike candles, it costs nothing. Unlike the sun, it asks for nothing in return. You look toward the window. The frost is glowing softly, edged in silver. Outside, the road is still. No lanterns, No fire, just the sky, and whatever the stars choose to give. Even the stars used to be brighter, before the cities took over, before the smoke and soot and electric haze dimmed them to a whisper. In your time, you can see the whole sky, every cluster, every arc. Future astronomers will come to places like this, your old fields, your quiet hills, just to remember what the sky used to look like. You don't need to visit it. You live beneath it. And beneath it, your sleep is whole even, if it's broken in two. The stars are fading now. You can feel it subtle, slow, a dull grey creeping into the black. Morning is still far off, but something's shifting. You lie in bed, beneath a rough wool blanket, not yet asleep, not quite awake. The second sleep hasn't come. And one day, it might not. Not because your body forgot, but because the world changed faster than it could follow. It starts in the towns. You hear stories vague, muttered things about cities lighting their streets, torches in sconces, lanterns hung from posts. In Paris, they say, by the early 1600s, entire districts are glowing with open flames. Watchmen are paid to trim wicks and replace oil through the night. By 1667, King Louis XIV himself orders thousands of lanterns to be installed across Paris, turning night into something else entirely. Not far behind, London follows suit. The first attempts come in the late 1600s, oil lamps, burning whale fat or linseed oil, flickering across shop signs and corners. In time, wealthy districts will be lit from sundown to sunrise. The wealthy begin to move freely after dark. Taverns stay open longer, visitors stroll later. The city begins to breathe at hours that once belonged only to the moon. But light is not the only thing creeping in. So are the clocks. Before, time had been something you felt. The sun climbed and fell. Bells tolled from churches. Roosters, shadows, hunger, these were the markers. But now, towns begin mounting mechanical clocks in towers. Some chime every hour, others tick steadily, measuring life in tiny, exact slices. It's not long before these clocks become more than tools. They become rulers. You begin to hear strange words: timekeeping, lateness, efficiency. Words that don't belong to fields or firewood. They belong to the new world, the world of factories. The shift is gradual at first. Early factories, like silk mills in England and Holland in the 1700s, require consistency. Workers must arrive by sunrise, leave at dusk. Later, when artificial light extends the workday, this will change. You'll rise earlier, sleep later. Sleep once shaped by sun and body will bow to the machine. It accelerates with the Industrial Revolution. By the 1760s and 1770s, spinning frames, steam engines, and cotton mills demand round-the-clock labor. Employers divide time into rigid shifts. Waking at midnight for prayer or poetry, there's no space for that now. You wake when the bell tells you to. You sleep when allowed. The soft gap between first and second sleep is crushed between steel and steam. Even in homes, pressure builds. Gas lighting begins to appear in the early 1800s. In 1807, London lights Pall Mall with gas for the first time. By the 1820s and 30s, entire cities glow with it. The soft dark of night, the time when your body once stirred gently between sleeps, is flooded with steady, bright, unnatural light. The effect is subtle, then swift. People start going to bed later. First sleep is shortened. Second sleep sometimes never comes. By the mid-19th century, accounts of biphasic sleep begin to vanish from diaries and letters. Not because it was disproven, but because it was overwritten. You watch your world transform, not in a single night, but in hundreds of them. The rich stay up later. Their candles are cheaper now. Their homes glow. They dine at 9, host guests until midnight, walk city boulevards past curfew, and those curfews, they once shaped the night. Before all this light, towns had strict rules after dark. Curfews weren't just recommendations, they were laws. The word itself comes from the old French couvre-feu, to cover fire. In medieval cities, bells rang to signal when fires had to be doused, candles snuffed, movement stopped. In England, curfew bells rang nightly for centuries. It wasn't just about safety. It was about silence, about preserving the night. But the night refuses to stay quiet. Even the church, once the keeper of sleep and seasons, begins to lose control. Prayer hours are replaced by production schedules. Midnight vigils give way to midnight shifts. And what of the peasants? In the countryside, people hold on longer. For decades, segmented sleep persists in rural areas. The dark remains dark, the rhythm familiar. But even here, change comes. Factory towns pull suns away, school bells replace rooster calls, oil lamps arrive. The world outside grows louder, brighter, faster. Eventually, even the villagers forget. And no one calls it first sleep anymore. The sun is not the first thing to wake you anymore. Once, the world stirred with the rooster, with the creeping edge of morning over the trees, with the breath of the wind shifting direction. Once, the sky decided when the day began. The body followed. Time flowed. Now, something else keeps time. It doesn't glow. It doesn't rise. It ticks. At first, you don't notice it. A bell tower, far off. A chime at the edge of hearing. Something strange but beautiful, curious, not yet intrusive. The kind of sound that rings through a village once or twice a day, marking noon or mass. You hear it, acknowledge it, and then return to whatever rhythm you were in. But it grows louder. Not the bell, but the idea behind it. You see it in towns first, cities, places with market stalls and cobbled squares. A new kind of time is being born. A time measured not in shadows or hunger or the position of the stars, but in teeth and gears and the slow turn of brass. The first mechanical clocks arrive in Europe in the 13th and 14th centuries. No hands, no faces, just chimes. They ring out across Florence, Milan, Paris, Nuremberg. Some are built into towers, monstrous machines wound by hand and maintained with reverence. They are marvels of craft, symbols of civic pride. At first, they are rare, but power loves order, and the clock offers a new kind of order. In monasteries, time becomes sacred. Prayers are no longer guided by candles or instinct. They are regimented by bells. Vespers, matins, lauds, the canonical hours. The clock becomes the keeper of devotion. Soon, the merchant class begins to adopt this rhythm not for holiness, but for profit. Markets open on time. Deliveries are timed to the hour. Meetings, deadlines, labor, payment. The ticking spreads. You hear it more often now, in bells rung hourly, in apprentices expected to show up promptly, in streets where work begins not at sunrise but at 6 sharp. Time begins to move differently, not in seasons, not in feelings, but in slices. Every hour becomes a room. Every room has a task. You are no longer simply awake or asleep. You are early or late. And being late begins to mean something. Something moral. Because as clocks invade cities, so too does the belief that discipline is virtue and discipline means obedience to time. You begin to hear stories about workers fined for showing up 5 minutes behind schedule, about children punished for moving too slowly, about women ridiculed for napping in daylight, about men shamed for sleeping in. The body no longer sets the pace. The clock does. And in this new world, waking in the middle of the night is no longer sacred. It is wrong. People begin to fear the night, to fear waking at 2 a.m. with a head full of thoughts. They stop lighting candles for prayer. They stop sitting with their dreams. Instead, they lie in the dark, begging for sleep to return quickly so they won't be tired when the clock commands them to rise. Time has been sliced and sold, and sleep fluid, natural, mysterious, is forced into a box. 8 hours. Straight through. No interruptions. And if you fail, you are weak. So you try. Everyone tries. They sleep later, wake earlier. They silence the instincts that used to guide them. They stop listening to the dark. They stop tending the fire in the night. They stop trusting the rhythm. And with each passing year, the ticking grows louder. In factories, time becomes tyranny. Punch cards, shifts, breaks, buzzers. You no longer wake when you're ready. You wake when you must. The middle of the night is not a gift. It is a problem. A failure. A flaw. So you hide it. You don't speak of the strange dreams you had between first and second sleep. You don't mention the hour you spent watching the stars. You don't wake your spouse to whisper. You lie still. You try to force unconsciousness. And in doing so, something is lost. Not just sleep, but a sense of self. Because now, you are what the clock says you are. Busy, late, tired, productive, wasting time, killing time, racing against time. You feel it in your chest when you wake before dawn. That guilt, that twitch in your stomach, that urge to check the hour, as if the clock will determine whether you're allowed to rest. You are no longer a person. You are a schedule. And when the night wakes you gently, as it always has, you do not rise with wonder. You lie there, in fear, wondering what's wrong with you. But you are not wrong. You are remembering. The ticking didn't start with malice. It started with craftsmanship, with beauty, with a desire to understand the world more precisely. But precision, once chained to profit, became control. And control does not make space for the hour between sleeps. The clock chimes again. Somewhere, in a distant square, a tower bell rings the 3rd hour after midnight. No one stirs. No one listens. But the body hears it. The body remembers. And in that silent hour, something stirs below the ticking. A rhythm older than gears, older than bells, older than time itself. It wasn't just sleep that changed. It was everything that came with it. That quiet hour wedged between your two rests was more than a pause in the night. It was a doorway to reflection, to connection, to stillness. When second sleep faded, it wasn't just a habit that vanished. It was a piece of the human experience. In your time, you cherish that hour. You don't name it. You don't need to, but you know it. It's when your thoughts are clearest. When the world around you is still and dim, and the fire hums low, and the silence feels alive, not empty. Sometimes you pray, not loudly, just a whisper, half in your throat, half in your chest. Sometimes you think of the day before, or the day ahead. Sometimes you lie beside someone and speak about things you'd never say when the sun is up. Historians and doctors of the future will study this strange middle hour. They'll learn that it was predictable, a natural part of the body's circadian rhythm. A rise in prolactin and melatonin makes you drift to sleep early. After about 4 hours, you wake. Not fully, just gently, naturally. Your mind is calm, your heart rate low. It's a state close to meditation. In this hour, people used to write letters, or tell stories, or slip out into the fields to check on the animals. Some stayed in bed and spoke softly confessions, dreams, worries, laughter. Couples reached for each other in this window, not out of duty, but out of peace. There are hundreds of historical references to this, in diaries, court depositions, even sermons. People considered it the ideal time for intimacy. Unhurried, private, unbothered. The 15th century physician, Laurent Joubert, mentioned that conception was believed to be more likely during this wakeful period between sleeps when the body was rested, the mind unburdened, and the world outside was quiet. Even monks understood the rhythm. The canonical hours, the structure of monastic prayer, acknowledged midnight vigils as sacred. Matins, one of the earliest prayers, was often recited at night. Waking in the dark wasn't seen as a flaw. It was a window to the divine. Then, over time, this sacred hour shrank. By the 19th century, as sleep compressed and the second segment disappeared, so did the possibilities inside that middle hour. What was once a time for peace and reflection became a problem to fix. You'll see it in future medical texts. People waking up at 2 a.m., anxious that something is wrong with them, doctors prescribing pills, books offering hacks to sleep through the night. No one remembers that once, waking up was normal. Not a failure of rest, but a feature of it. Even dreams changed. With 2 sleeps, people often remembered more. There was time to discuss them, to reflect on the strange images from the first sleep before falling into the second. Dreams were part of your night, not tucked away in a rushed, final hour. And something else was lost, too. Stillness. Real stillness. The kind that happens when the world isn't buzzing. When there's no artificial light, no phone glow, no noise crawling through the walls. Just firelight. And cold air. And the soft, rhythmic breath of those around you. People in your time knew how to sit in the dark. Not in fear, but in comfort. Today, the modern world fights that darkness. It floods the night with white light. It stretches work hours. It glorifies hustle. The body still remembers how to sleep in 2 acts, but the world no longer gives it permission. Even in rural areas, the pattern eroded. As lamps arrived, and work hours shifted, and clocks found their way into cottages, people began to ignore that natural waking hour. They pushed bedtime later. They tried to stay asleep longer. The quiet hour between sleeps became a forgotten space, unmarked, unmissed. But in your time, it still lives. You lie there, your first sleep behind you. The fire is low but alive. You hear the wind at the door. Maybe you shift in your blanket. Maybe you murmur something to the person beside you. Maybe you just listen to your thoughts settle. And then slowly, gently, you drift again. Back into sleep. No urgency, no anxiety. Just the dark, folding over you like a second blanket. Second sleep. A rhythm that once guided humanity for thousands of years. A rhythm that waited in silence and then disappeared. Your sleep is not always the same. It changes, with the wind, with the crops, with the tilt of the world. You sleep like the earth breathes in and out, long and slow, warm and cold, always shifting. In winter, the night arrives early. It settles like snow, heavy and silent, by mid-afternoon. You feel it creeping into the corners of the house even before the sun has vanished. Everything slows. Everyone draws nearer to the hearth. And sleep comes early, sometimes as early as dusk. Not because you are tired, but because the world is. There is nothing else to do. No fields to tend, no errands to run, no light to see by. You eat your stew, you speak your prayers, and then you retreat under the blanket, sometimes before the 6th bell has rung. The fire becomes your only sun. Its orange glow plays across the walls. You watch it dance behind your eyelids. You fall asleep without effort. This time of year, your sleep stretches long. 13, 14 hours. Not all at once. First sleep, a waking. Second sleep, then more dozing near dawn. A third, lighter layer of rest that drifts into morning like fog over the hills. No one calls it laziness. It's simply winter. And in winter, the body asks for more. The house is colder. So you sleep beside others, siblings, sometimes cousins. You share heat. You build nests of wool and straw and fur. It isn't shameful. It's survival. You press close to one another, arms tucked, feet tangled. And in that closeness, something ancient stirs. You dream more in winter. Maybe because the sleep is longer. Maybe because the dark holds you tighter. Maybe because your mind wanders differently when the world outside is frozen. You remember these dreams more vividly. They linger into that first waking. You whisper them across shared pillows. You ask your grandmother what they mean. And she answers with stories. Of ravens that carry souls. Of dreams that foretell the weather. Of visitors from the dead. Not all are comforting. Some nights you wake with your heart pounding. The frost creeps up the windows. The fire is low. You feel the dark pressing in. But even then there's no shame in waking. You stir the coals. You light a rushlight. You sip warm water from the pot near the fire. You wait, and sleep returns. It always returns. But then, the seasons turn. Spring arrives, not all at once, but in gasps. A softer wind, a longer ray of sun, birdsong before the fifth bell. And with the change in light, your sleep shifts. You stay awake later. The fire dies earlier. The cold releases its grip. There is more to do. Seeds to plant, fences to mend, chickens to chase. Sleep comes later, lighter. The second sleep is shorter. Sometimes it doesn't come at all, not because it's gone, but because the body doesn't ask for it every night. In summer, sleep becomes something else entirely. The heat settles like a second skin. The house is too warm, so you leave the shutters open. Breezes drift through the room like curious guests. The moon spills in. You hear dogs barking down the lane. A baby crying in the distance. Laughter from neighbors who haven't yet gone to bed. Sometimes you sleep outdoors, under a roofed porch, in the field with the animals, beneath stars that don't blink. The summer sleep is thinner. It breaks more easily. You wake often, not from dreams, but from thirst, from sweat, from heat rising off the floorboards. And sometimes, when it's too hot to lie down, you just sit. Sit in the dark. Sit and wait. You've learned not to fight the night. It does not always offer sleep. Sometimes it offers other things, stillness, reflection, breath. In the summer, everyone wakes earlier. The work starts before the sun climbs high. You dream less, but you notice more. Colors, sounds. The way sweat beads on the upper lip before you even lift the pail, and by harvest season, your sleep is less about preference than necessity. You drop into it like a stone into water. Deep, dreamless, gone. But it always changes again. In autumn, the light begins to retreat. The house grows quieter. The evenings stretch once more. The second sleep returns with the frost. This cycle, the stretch and pull of sleep across seasons, is never questioned. No one tells you to aim for consistency. No one hands you a schedule. No one speaks of 8 hours. You sleep when the day allows it. You rest when the body calls for it. And that call is different in July than it is in January. You do not resist this. You adapt. The older ones say the rhythm keeps you sane. That madness comes from pretending the body is a machine, that we are animals, that we are crops, that we are ruled by the same clock as the birds, the trees, the rivers. And so you live that way. You do not see your sleep as broken. You see it as breathing. In, out, deep, shallow, fast, slow, always in motion. But in the future, this will change. Heating will flatten the seasons. Artificial light will erase the difference between day and night. Climate control will mean people sleep the same way in July as they do in December and wonder why they feel wrong. The world will tell them to sleep in one block, every night, the same. And when their bodies resist, when they wake in summer with restlessness or sleep too long in winter, they will call themselves lazy, disordered, dysfunctional. They will forget that sleep is not obedience. It is relationship. A relationship with light, with cold, with work, with self. Some will fight this. They will experiment with early dinners, darkened rooms, open windows. They will camp, nap, wander, dream again. They will learn to sleep seasonally, slowly, softly. But it will take time. And, in the meantime, the night will wait. And so will you. You wouldn't know it at the time, of course, but the rhythm your body lived by the slow drift into sleep, the natural waking in the middle of the night, the peaceful second descent would one day be called a mystery, or worse, a disorder. You didn't name your sleep pattern, you didn't need to, but the future would. They'd call it segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep, or polyphasic sleep, or perhaps, most often, insomnia, and they'd treat it like something broken. But centuries later, someone would go digging through the past. Someone would look closer. That someone was Roger Ekirch, a historian from Virginia Tech, who in the early 2000s published a paper that would ripple through both history departments and sleep labs alike. He combed through diaries, medical texts, court records, and literature. What he found shocked even him. Over 500 references to a lost practice, people going to bed shortly after sunset, sleeping for 4 or 5 hours, then waking for 1 or 2, then sleeping again until dawn. These weren't fringe accounts. They spanned centuries, countries, classes, cultures. People all across early modern Europe and beyond experienced the same thing. First sleep, a period of rest. A wakeful hour, quiet and purposeful. And second sleep, where rest deepened again. Even in the 19th century, just as segmented sleep was vanishing, you could still find it. In 1840, Charles Dickens wrote of characters who lay awake during the dead of the night between the first and second sleeps. In rural Ireland, villagers still talked about their first sleep and how it was unlucky to be disturbed during it. In Tunisia, as late as the 1990s, anthropologists found references to first sleep in local conversation, though even the speakers didn't know where the term came from. It had just remained. The rhythm was so old, it had become invisible. Ekirch's findings caught the attention of sleep scientists, who wondered, what happens to modern people in the absence of artificial light? So they tested it. In one now famous study, healthy volunteers were placed in complete darkness for 14 hours a day, every day, for several weeks. At first, the participants slept excessively, catching up on modern sleep debt. But then, a pattern emerged. They began sleeping in 2 distinct blocks, first for about 4 hours, then waking naturally for 1 or 2, then falling back asleep again for another 3 to 4. They didn't feel tired. They didn't feel anxious. In fact, most described the experience as profoundly restful. Their bodies remembered. The scientists measured hormonal changes. During the wakeful period, the body released prolactin, the same hormone that promotes feelings of calm and satiety in nursing mothers. Participants described the hour between sleeps as deeply peaceful, emotionally soothing, and mentally clear. It was a biological rhythm older than clocks, older than candles, older than language, maybe. So what happened? The answer, as always, lies in the world around you. For thousands of years, people woke naturally in the middle of the night. They didn't panic. They didn't check a clock. There was no clock. They simply stirred, reflected, prayed, wrote, whispered, and drifted off again. Then came the fire, the lamps, the gaslight, the filaments, the cities, the factories, and with them, the need to compress rest, to fit sleep neatly between the demands of productivity. The body didn't stop wanting its 2 acts of rest, but the schedule left no room for it. Today, people who wake up at 2:30 a.m. feel ashamed. They reach for sleeping pills. They stare at the ceiling, cursing their brains. But they're not sick. They're remembering. In fact, many of the people most affected by modern sleep disorders, shift workers, those with screen exposure late at night, people living under bright artificial light, are dealing not just with fatigue, but with disruption of a much older pattern. And now, slowly, quietly, the world is starting to catch on. The internet is filled with sleep tracking apps, meditation playlists, and sleep hygiene guides. Some encourage powering down lights after sunset. Others suggest avoiding screens, using candles, or going to bed earlier and waking without alarms. And when people try this, they often notice something odd. They begin waking up at night, not in panic, not in discomfort, just awake. For an hour, sometimes 2, then back to sleep again. They think something is wrong, but maybe something is finally right. Even now, some cultures retain fragments of the old rhythm. In Spain, siestas and late-night activity hint at alternative schedules. In some rural communities, children nap naturally, and elders sleep in shorter bursts across the day and night. The modern world tries to flatten sleep into a single block, but the human body has always resisted. There's growing interest in biphasic and polyphasic sleep among researchers and tech communities alike. Not because it's trendy, because it's innate. Some now argue that the ideal sleep may not be a single block at all, but 2 natural segments separated by a calm, gentle hour of wakefulness. Not screen time, not noise, just stillness, journaling, reflection. Even the act of lying quietly, eyes open, without pressure to sleep. It echoes what you once knew. You didn't call it a technique, you didn't time it, you didn't optimize it, you just lived it. That small, forgotten hour between the sleeps was a kind of gift, a space the modern world erased. And now, quietly, it is trying to reclaim it, because the body never forgot. And now, slowly, neither will we. The house is still. You are between 2 nights, between 2 selves. Not yet dreaming, not yet awake. And in this soft, dark hour, the world behind your eyelids is closer than the one outside. This is the hour of dreams. You don't remember them all. No one does. But in this hour, this gentle waking, you catch their fragments before they fade. A river, impossibly wide. A voice you know but cannot place. A face seen long ago that speaks without moving. The smell of smoke, the sound of bees. A feeling in your chest like flight or grief or something unnamed. You don't try to make sense of it right away. You sit up, slowly. The fire is low as always. You let the room settle around you. Let your heart slow. You hold the dream like a feather cupped in your palms, fragile, fading, but real. In your time, no one tells you that dreams are nonsense. No one tells you to forget them. Dreams matter. They are stories from somewhere else. Messages, signs. You speak of them over breakfast. You whisper them into the dark. You carry them like warnings, or gifts, or puzzles only time can solve. There are dreams you have that feel bigger than you, as if the sky itself handed them down. Sometimes you wake from them weeping, sometimes laughing, sometimes afraid. You tell your mother, and she nods. She has dreamed, too. In medieval Europe, dreams are not dismissed. They are studied, recorded, prayed over. Entire books are written to interpret them, how to tell a vision from a deception, a prophecy from a passing thought. The clergy call them divine. The folk call them signs. Physicians say they rise from the stomach, from the humors, from imbalance or excess. But no one calls them useless. No one tells you to ignore them. And in this segmented world, where first and second sleep shape the night your dreams have space to breathe, the waking hour between sleeps becomes a time for remembering. You rise from first sleep not in panic, but in curiosity. The dream is fresh in your mind. You speak it aloud, you walk it back in your thoughts. You stir the fire and feel its shape again in your chest. Maybe you write it on parchment, on a scrap, scratched into wood. Maybe you repeat it to yourself like a psalm, so you won't forget when morning comes. Maybe you share it with someone beside you, half asleep, half listening. There's power in that telling. The dream becomes real when it is spoken. The future will forget this. They will wake to alarms, to deadlines, to phone screens. Dreams will fade before they're remembered, replaced by to-do lists, shoved aside by noise. People will tell themselves dreams don't matter, that they're strange chemical nonsense, random, disordered, meaningless. But something in them will ache, because even if they don't remember their dreams, they'll remember what it felt like to have them, the way they lingered, the way they haunted or helped, and they will crave the space to find them again. The science will come later. Studies will show that the gap between first and second sleep is rich with REM cycles. That waking between sleeps often enhances dream recall, that the brain is more active in that soft hour than in the depths of night. They'll call it a cognitive bridge, a space of insight. Some will say it was the first form of therapy, but you don't need those terms. You just know that some of your clearest thoughts come in this hour, some of your gentlest memories, some of your hardest questions. You've solved problems here, in the dark, with no sound but the fire and your breath. You've mourned here, loved here, imagined whole lives that will never happen, and still felt grateful for them. This hour is not empty. It is fertile, and in the world ahead, it will be paved over. Walled off by electric light, buried in exhaustion, but it will not be gone. Somewhere, someone will wake in the middle of the night. Their room will be silent, their body still. They will remember something that has no name, a face from a dream, a sentence, a song, and they will know deep in their chest that it matters. Maybe they won't know why, but they'll feel it, and in that moment, they will not be alone. Because you too once sat by a dying fire, blinking at a dream you could not explain, holding it gently, letting it live, letting it go. And that rhythm, that sacred breath between sleeps is still inside them, waiting. You'd think that with all the advancements, all the science, all the glowing screens and pill bottles and smart mattresses, people would sleep better now. But they don't. They sleep less. They sleep worse. They lie in bed for hours, staring at ceilings and blue lights, wondering why their bodies feel like strangers. In your world, the medieval one, you slept in sync with the planet. You rose with the sun. You fell into rest as it disappeared. You weren't chasing productivity. You weren't chasing anything. Sleep was not a battle. It was a rhythm. A pattern so familiar you barely noticed it was there. But centuries from now, that rhythm will be gone. Not because humans evolved past it, but because the world bulldozed over it. It began with machines, with steam and coal and iron, with factories that demanded bodies in seats at 6 in the morning, with whistles that replaced roosters, with gaslight that stretched workdays and blurred evenings into profit. The 19th century was the first sleepless century, at least the first one to be proud of it. Men who once sat by firelight talking softly to their wives now punched into mills, groggy and stiff. Women who used to rise between sleeps to nurse children or sew in peace were now pressed into textile factories, where the clatter never stopped. Children once curled under shared blankets, lulled by the dark, were shoved into schools and schedules, taught that waking in the night was wrong. The 20th century doubled down. Electricity surged through cities, streets lit up like day, neon signs, office towers, the 9 to 5, and the graveyard shift. Airplanes flying through time zones, televisions glowing until midnight, the tick of a second-hand ruling every hour. Sleep became inconvenient, so they started selling it. Pills, supplements, weighted blankets, memory foam, blue light glasses, white noise machines. A billion-dollar industry built not to restore your rhythm, but to force it to match the machine. And still, people couldn't sleep. Not the way they used to. Because it wasn't just the light, or the clocks, or the work. It was the noise. Noise in the head. Noise in the soul. You scroll late into the night, eyes burning, phone glowing. You drink coffee to wake and wine to sleep. You schedule everything, even rest. You track your sleep with graphs. You compare your REM cycles with strangers online. You're exhausted. Even the word insomnia has bloomed into a modern epidemic. In the medieval world, there were no sleeping pills, no diagnoses. People didn't fear waking at 2 a.m. They expected it. They welcomed it. But now, waking up at night feels like failure. Burnout, too, is a modern disease. You didn't burn out in the 1300s. You broke your back in the fields. You suffered, yes, but not from too many emails or existential dread at 3 a.m. You lived hard, but you rested honestly. Modernity gave you more hours in the day, but stole the one that mattered most. That hour between sleeps. The one where your mind softened, where you could breathe. Where you weren't a worker, a consumer, a target audience. You were just you. A person sitting beside a fire, watching the sparks rise. It's ironic. All the effort, all the inventions, all the scheduling and optimizing and tracking, and still, people long for silence, for peace, for sleep that feels like sleep. So they try to claw it back. They buy blackout curtains, they turn off notifications, they meditate, they go off-grid for a weekend, they stare at the stars and feel something stir in their chest, something they can't quite name, but you know what it is. It's memory. Not personal memory, but something deeper. Body memory. An ancient knowledge buried beneath generations of buzzing light and sleepless nights. The memory of rest. Real rest. You had it once. Not because your world was perfect. It wasn't. You were cold. You were poor. You worked until your hands cracked. But your body knew when to sleep. And it knew how to wake. And it never judged you for either. The modern world gave people comfort, but took away ease. It gave choice, but took away instinct. And so, millions now lie in bed, wondering what's wrong with them. Why their thoughts race at midnight. Why they feel most alive in the dead of night. Why, even when they sleep, they don't feel rested. Maybe it's because they're sleeping against themselves. Maybe they've been told to live in a rhythm that was never theirs to begin with. And maybe, just maybe, remembering you, your quiet night, your soft waking, your second sleep, might be the key to finding it again. Because the truth is, we didn't evolve past segmented sleep. We forgot it. And now, we're tired. You didn't think of sleep as a sin. Not at first. When you were small, sleep was a given. You lay your head down when the world went dark. You rose when the light returned. No one asked you to justify it. No one demanded you earn it. It came like hunger, like thirst, natural, repeating. But as you grew, you began to hear another voice. Not in your home, but in the chapel. The voice of a priest, firm and echoing, saying words that caught like thorns. Sloth is death to the soul. The idle hands invite the devil. Sleep when the work is done, not before. And something shifted inside you. Suddenly, sleep had a shape. Not a soft, breathing rhythm, but a boundary. An edge you weren't meant to cross without permission. You learned the list by heart, as every child did. The 7 deadly sins. And there, tucked among wrath and envy and pride, was sloth. Laziness, lethargy, the refusal to move, to serve, to produce, And so sleep, once a simple surrender, became something to watch, to weigh, to second guess. The church never banned sleep, but it wrapped it in rules. Rise with the bells, pray before dawn, fast during hours of rest, confess if you slept through your duties. Holiness, they said, was about vigilance. Saints didn't oversleep. Monks didn't nap. Angels didn't waste time in bed. The body was seen as weak, suspect, prone to indulgence, and sleep, especially deep, luxurious sleep, was one of its most tempting pleasures. Too much of it meant softness, meant sin. You remember lying awake on winter mornings, the fire low, the room still wrapped in cold. You wanted to stay under the blanket, just a little longer. But in the back of your mind, that voice stirred again. Do not be slothful. The righteous rise early. To lie in bed is to turn from God. You weren't taught these words in anger. They came gently, woven into sermons, into stories, into proverbs. But they stuck. Even the stories of saints praised their wakefulness, their suffering, their refusal to rest. Saint Catherine of Siena slept 2 hours a night. Saint Rose of Lima lay on a bed of glass shards and cacti. Even Christ, they said, warned his followers in Gethsemane. Could you not watch with me 1 hour? The ideal was not peace. It was endurance. And so, across the centuries, this belief took root. Not just in the church, in the village, in the home, in the mind. That to sleep too long was shameful. That to rest while others worked was selfish. That stillness must be earned. And so even as you slept, you judged yourself. Waking in the night used to feel sacred, a pause, a gift. But now, it made you anxious. Would people think you slept too much? Would the Lord frown upon this second rest? Was this hour between sleeps a holy moment, or a temptation? You began to ask questions you never used to ask. Have I done enough to deserve this stillness? Am I wasting the night? Is this how sloth begins? And in that asking, something precious slipped away. Because shame is not a natural companion to sleep. You weren't born with it. It was given to you, handed down like an heirloom no one wanted to inherit. And it didn't stop with you. Even centuries later, that shame remained. It wore different clothes, spoke in different voices. It said, I'll rest when I've earned it. You can sleep when you're dead. If you're not grinding, you're falling behind. It came not from pulpits, but from conference rooms. Not from priests, but from bosses. But the message was the same. Stillness is indulgence. Sleep is weakness. Rest must be justified. And so people drank coffee instead of napping. They bragged about pulling all-nighters. They apologized for sleeping in, even on weekends. They carried exhaustion like a badge of honor. And all the while, their bodies whispered, this is not how we're meant to live. Because the rhythm you lost wasn't just physical. It was moral. You were taught that movement is virtue. That pause is guilt. That the sacred lies in effort, not ease. But what if they were wrong? What if sleep is not a flaw to overcome, but a return to grace? What if the hour between sleeps, the soft waking, the dream reflection, the breath by firelight is not indulgence, but insight? What if stillness is holy? Some people are starting to ask that now. They speak of Sabbath, not as restriction, but as restoration. They practice silence, take digital fasts, block out hours for unproductive presence. They reclaim naps. They lie in bed with open eyes and let their thoughts wander not with guilt, but with permission. They are learning that rest is not a reward for suffering. It is a right. Not because they've worked enough, but because they are human, and in that rediscovery, the shame begins to crack. Stillness does not need to be defended. Sleep does not need to be earned. And second sleep, long dismissed, begins to rise again, not as a sin, but as a sanctuary. You don't realize you're living in a golden age of rest until it's already gone. In your time, rest isn't something you chase. It just is, built into the shape of the day, into the sky, into your bones. The sun goes down, you sleep, you wake, you sleep again. There's no need to explain it. It's not productive. It's not monetized. It's not named. It just happens. But in the future, rest becomes a pursuit. People chase it like they chase wealth, like they chase success. Because the one thing modern life will starve them of more than money, more than meaning, is peace, quiet, uninterrupted breath. True, rhythmic, natural sleep. So they begin reaching back, not in a grand, sweeping rebellion, not in some perfect reenactment of your medieval world, but in fragments, in quiet acts of refusal. It starts with a candle. Someone lights one, instead of turning on the overhead bulb. They don't know why it feels better, only that it does. It's warmer, softer. It makes the night feel like it's supposed to, less hostile, less glaring. Then they turn off their phone after dinner. They stop scrolling. They read a book instead. A real one, with pages, the kind that doesn't light up or buzz, and slowly their breathing changes. Their posture softens. The world becomes quieter. They go to bed earlier, not because they're being good, not because a podcast told them to, just because their body asked for it, and this time they listened. And then it happens. They wake up at 2 a.m. or 3:30, not in panic, not in anxiety, just awake, in the dark, still, calm. They sit in the quiet. Maybe they write, maybe they pray, maybe they lie back and listen to the wind outside. They don't realize it yet, but they've just rediscovered something lost for centuries. The second sleep waits. This is happening all over the world. People are unplugging, going off-grid, buying blackout curtains and sunrise alarm clocks, sleeping in cabins, in tents, in silence. They're doing cold plunges, forest walks, slow mornings, not because it's trendy, but because everything else feels unbearable. The pace of modern life burns through the nervous system like fire through dry grass. Always rushing. Always reacting. Always needing to be on. But your time, the medieval world, had built-in rest. Not just physical, but psychological. The pace was slow because it had to be. You couldn't rush a loaf of bread. You couldn't summon a message across town in seconds. You couldn't flip a switch and erase the night. Your world made peace with darkness, and in doing so, it gave you a rhythm of sleep the body still longs for today. The modern world, on the other hand, has fought darkness tooth and nail. It filled the sky with artificial light. It made time a commodity. It squeezed the soul out of sleep and replaced it with 5-hour energy shots, motivational alarms, and corporate wellness slogans. And now, people are exhausted. They're not just tired, they're weary in their cells. They've tried everything: caffeine, medication, therapy, technology, and still, something inside them whispers, "You were never meant to live like this." So they start to slow down. They leave their phones in another room. They eat dinner at candlelight. They lie in bed before 9. Not because they're old, not because they're boring, because they're finally listening to something ancient. Their own biology. They try circadian fasting, eating only in daylight hours. They talk about melatonin. They learn that their bodies follow a sleep-wake hormone cycle that once aligned perfectly with sunrise and firelight. They hear about the prolactin plateau, that peaceful, calm hormonal window that happens between two natural sleep phases. They hear terms like segmented sleep and biphasic rhythm. It sounds radical, new, but it's not. It's what you did every night without needing to name it. They talk about going analog, slow mornings, no screens. They turn back to the tactile handwritten notes, paper books, clay cups, things that ground them, things that remind them of being human. And they try things like blue light filters, night shift mode, sleep sanctuaries. But what they're really trying to do is recreate your cottage, your fire, your stillness. Not because they miss the hardship, but because they miss the rhythm. They don't want to churn, they want to rest, and more importantly, they want permission to rest. Your world didn't give you much, but it gave you that. No one in your village shamed you for sleeping. No one told you waking at 2 a.m. was unnatural. No one expected you to check in, catch up, or apply all. You could lie in bed, listen to the crackle of the fire, whisper to your loved one, or simply sit, breathing, as the dark settled over the thatched roof like a blanket. Today, people are trying to stitch that feeling back together. They go on retreats, not lavish ones, quiet ones, where the goal is not transformation or optimization, but deceleration. The goal is simply to be, to wake in the night and not panic, to sit by a flame and feel whole, because something deep inside them remembers. It's not nostalgia. It's memory, the kind that lives in the nervous system, in the heartbeat, in the slow blink of eyelids halfway between dreams. You didn't name your second sleep. You didn't brand it. You didn't try to sell it. You just lived it. And now, people are trying to live it again. Because maybe the cure for modern restlessness isn't in the future. Maybe it's in the past, in something forgotten, something quiet, something lost in the noise of progress. And when they wake at 3 a.m. tomorrow, heart steady, thoughts clear, and they sit in the quiet, not with shame but with gratitude, then they are not broken. They are remembering you. You don't hold a torch in the street. You don't wear wool or sleep beside a hearth. But somehow, simply going to bed early now feels radical. Because in this world, this future world, you're expected to burn at both ends. To work late, reply faster, scroll endlessly. To sleep less, do more, be more. And if your body can't keep up, you're told to fix it. With pills, with caffeine, with shame. Rest has become a luxury, a reward. Something you earn only after the work is done. But the work is never done. So the rest never comes. And yet, you remember a different world. Not perfectly, not consciously, but deep in the body, in the breath, in the rhythm of your own heartbeat, you remember sleep that wasn't scheduled, optimized, or tracked. Sleep that unfolded like a story. 2 chapters, 1 gentle pause between. And now, every time you put your phone down before bed, every time you stop checking messages after dinner, every time you sit in the dark without reaching for a screen, you're not just resting, you're resisting. Because real rest is no longer normal, it's defiance. It says, I will not live by the pace of the machine. It says, I will not treat my body like a broken tool. It says, I remember a time when waking up in the night was sacred, not scary. In your time, you didn't know this was political. But now, in the world to come, sleep is a battlefield. The system wants speed, efficiency, productivity. People who sleep 8 hours, wake up refreshed, and sell their hours without question. People who live by schedules, hustle through fatigue, and never slow down long enough to wonder what it's all for. But when you choose stillness, when you sleep early without guilt, when you rise in the middle of the night and sit quietly, watching the darkness settle in your chest like a calm tide, you become dangerous. You step outside the timeline the world gave you. You stop obeying the false urgency, and you begin to remember that life was never meant to move this fast. That's why the return to natural sleep is more than a health trend. It's a healing, a reconnection, a rewilding of the most human rhythm there is. In medieval times, you weren't lazy for resting. You weren't weak for sleeping twice. You were in sync with something older than the church, older than kings, older than time itself. The body knew, the stars knew, the land knew. Now, people look to data to tell them when to sleep. They wear rings and watches to track what you once understood instinctively. They panic at 3 a.m. and think they're broken, but they're not. They're waking up in the space where second sleep used to live, and if they stop fighting it, if they welcome it, they'll find something there. Something gentle, something whole. This is the new rebellion. Not louder, not faster, but quieter. A kind of slowness that doesn't apologize. A kind of fatigue that doesn't need fixing. A kind of rhythm that remembers what we were before the noise took over. You see it in the smallest acts. A teenager deleting TikTok because her brain hurts. A tired mother lighting a candle instead of turning on the overhead. A man in a suit choosing to read in silence instead of binging until midnight. A family eating dinner without screens, then stepping outside to look at the stars. They may not say it out loud, but they are reaching backward, inward, toward you. Not the hardships of your life, not the struggle or the cold or the hunger, but toward the wisdom buried in your nights, because you knew something we forgot. Rest is not earned, it is needed. It is human, and the more the modern world denies that truth, the more exhausted and lost it becomes. So people begin planting new seeds. They talk about sleep with tenderness. They teach their children not to fear the night. They create new rituals, tea before bed, stretching, moon gazing, reading by dim light. They stop chasing sleep and start welcoming it. They allow themselves to be soft. That softness becomes strength. Because a rested person doesn't panic. A rested person doesn't spiral. A rested person can feel, can think clearly, can say no. This is not weakness. This is the foundation of resilience. And maybe, just maybe, this is how we heal. Not by running harder, but by stopping, by sleeping, by remembering that the answer isn't always ahead. Sometimes, it's behind, in the dark, in the hush, in the hour between sleeps. You didn't need permission to rest. You didn't need a sleep app or a doctor's note. You followed the dark like a river and let it carry you home. Now, people are learning to do the same, one night at a time. One still moment at a time. They're taking it back. And in doing so, they're not just reclaiming sleep. They're reclaiming themselves. You wake up, the clock says 2:41 a.m. The room is quiet, dim, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of a wall clock. You lie still, blinking into the dark. You don't know what stirred you, a shift in temperature, a passing thought, a dream already dissolving. You should go back to sleep. That's what the world has trained you to do. Close your eyes, ignore it, don't look at your phone, don't get up. You have work in the morning, you have a meeting at 9. You need to sleep. 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 But you don't force it. You listen. There's something soft in the silence. Something kind. You realize your breath is steady. You're not anxious. You're not restless. You're just awake. And somehow, that feels okay. You sit up slowly. The sheets rustle. You feel the air against your skin cool. Still, not unfriendly. There's a little moonlight coming through the blinds. You look toward the door, toward the clock again, and then toward the window. You rise. Not for coffee, not to check your email, just to move. You walk barefoot to the kitchen, fill a glass of water. The faucet gurgles, then quiets. You take a slow sip. The house is silent. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence. Listening, holding, offering. You don't turn on the lights. You light a candle instead. It surprises you. how much that changes the space, how warm it feels, how suddenly alive. The flicker plays across the counter, across the edge of the table. You carry it with you like a lantern. Back in the living room, you sit down. No phone, no noise, just the candle. And your breath. You stare at the flame for a long time. You think about the dream, half remembered. Something about a road, a familiar voice, the feeling of running. Not out of fear, but towards something. You try to hold on to it, just a little longer. It's been a long time since you've sat like this. Not meditating, not journaling, not doing anything at all. Just being. You look at your hands in the candlelight, your palms, your fingertips. You feel their warmth. You feel the blood moving beneath them, slow and steady. You wonder, is this what it used to be like? Before the noise, before the clocks, before the world asked you to be a machine. You imagine someone else hundreds of years ago doing exactly what you're doing now, stirring a fire, holding a candle, sitting in silence between sleeps. Not broken, not defective, just human. And in that moment, something shifts. The shame lifts. You are not wasting time. You are not failing at rest. You are remembering it. You sit for a while longer. You don't think about how many hours are left until dawn. You don't calculate the impact on your productivity. You don't try to fix yourself. You let the candle flicker. You let your breath deepen. You let yourself belong to the night. Eventually, you stand. You blow out the candle. You walk back to bed. And as you slide beneath the blanket body, warm, mind, quiet, you do not feel panic. You feel peace. You feel whole. You close your eyes, and sleep returns like a tide. Not rushed. Not forced. Just ready. Just yours. And somewhere in the space between dreams, you carry with you something soft, something sacred, something old. A rhythm long forgotten, now alive again. The fire is low again. You don't open your eyes right away. You feel it before you see it, the quiet weight of night still resting over the cottage, the hush of a world that hasn't stirred yet. Your feet are tucked beneath rough wool. Someone shifts beside you. A familiar breath rises and falls near your shoulder. You are warm, safe, still. You don't need to move, not yet. But the embers are calling you. You open your eyes. The ceiling beams above you stretch out like ribs in the dark. There's a soft orange pulse near the hearth, barely a flame, just the memory of one. You rise slowly, carefully. Your body knows this motion. You've done it countless times. Not from insomnia, not from panic, just from rhythm. This is the way sleep works. For you, for your neighbors, for everyone you know. First sleep, then waking, then second sleep. No one told you it was strange. No one measured your sleep in cycles or minutes. No one asked you to explain why you're awake at this hour. You just are, and there is no shame in that. You rise, stretch, pad across the dirt floor, and kneel by the hearth. You place 2 small sticks on the embers, gently coax the warmth back into light. The glow spills across your face, dancing in the iron pot still hanging above yesterday's ash. This hour is yours. There's no labor yet, no cries from the field, no demands, only breath, only silence. You sit back and listen. The air outside is cold, but not cruel. There's a faint whisper through the thatch, the creak of old wood, the soft wheeze of the dog curled near the door. Everything alive around you is resting. Even the dark is gentle tonight. Your mind begins to wander. You think about the day ahead, about the bread that must rise, the fence that needs mending, the neighbor who promised to bring salt. You think about the past, about the faces of people who've gone, about things you wish you'd said, and the stories your grandmother told you when you were small. You don't force these thoughts. They rise like steam from your chest, soft, slow, and without direction. This is your hour between, some might call it useless, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like a gift, something placed here for you and you alone. A gentle pause, a space to sit inside your own soul. And you are not alone. There are other fires flickering tonight, behind other windows, across the fields and hills. Other people awake, not because they must, but because their bodies ask them to. Some are praying. Some are holding hands. Some are writing. Some are simply breathing, like you, and listening to the silence. Centuries from now, this moment will vanish. The world will race ahead. Oil lamps, gaslight, light bulbs, screens. The soft dark of your cottage will be replaced by cities that never sleep, homes that never dim, minds that never quiet. People will forget this rhythm. They'll forget there was ever a time when sleep came in waves, not blocks. When waking at 2 a.m. was not a failure, but a part of being human. But your body won't forget. And neither will theirs. Somewhere in the future, a woman will light a candle for no reason and find herself suddenly calm. A boy will wake in the night and write poems in a notebook, unsure why it feels sacred. A couple will lie in bed and talk for an hour at midnight, laughing softly in the dark, and feel closer than they have in months. They'll call it self-care, or mindfulness, or intuition. But what they're really doing is returning to you, to this. To a sleep that breathes like the earth. They'll realize, slowly, painfully, that rest isn't weakness, that softness isn't shameful, that their bodies have always known how to find peace if only they'd listen. And some will begin to listen. They'll stop shaming themselves for waking in the night. They'll dim their lights. They'll turn off their phones. They'll go to bed early. Not because they're disciplined, but because they're tired. And they're done pretending they're not. They will not rebuild your world. The fields, the wooden beams, the tallow candles, those are gone. But they will rebuild the rhythm. Sleep, wake, rest again. And in doing so, they will carry something of you forward. You sit by the fire a little longer. Your eyes grow heavy. You don't force it. You don't chase sleep. You let it return, like a tide. You lie back down, under the blanket, next to the warmth of your family. The fire still glows faintly. The cottage is quiet. And your thoughts dissolve like dust in the dawn. Your second sleep begins. And somewhere far in the future, a person reads these words, and something in their chest aches. Not with sadness, but with recognition. They've been tired for years. Tired of always performing, always producing, always rushing. Tired of waking up in the dark and thinking something is wrong with them. Tired of treating sleep like a competition. Rest like a weakness. And now they understand. They're not broken. They're remembering. This is not about nostalgia. It's not about rejecting progress. It's about reclaiming what progress accidentally erased. That soft hour between sleeps. That slow night. That gentle return to self. So tonight they'll do something small. Maybe they'll turn off the lights a little earlier. Maybe they'll light a candle and sit in silence. Maybe they'll wake at 3 a.m. and just lie there, not scrolling, not worrying, just listening to the dark. And when they do, you'll be there. Not as a ghost, not as a myth, but as a rhythm, still beating beneath the noise. You have faded from view. The fire you lit is cold now. The straw mattress has flattened. The beams of the cottage have been reclaimed by rot and time. The world you knew, dim, slow, rough, honest, has fallen into the pages of history. You do not walk here anymore. And yet, you are not gone. You remain. In rhythm, in breath, in the hush between two halves of the night. The story of sleep isn't over. It was never just yours. And it was never really about sleep. It was about trust. Trusting your body to know what it needs. Trusting the dark not to harm you. Trusting that silence is not empty. That rest is not failure. That slowness is not shameful. In your time, that trust was unspoken. You didn't question it. You rose and lay down with the sun. You stirred in the night, because that's what bodies do. You lived with the land, with the seasons, with rhythms older than scripture. And then the lights came, not all at once. First it was candles for the rich, then oil lamps for the streets, then gas, then wires, then bulbs that hummed behind closed eyelids. Cities that glowed like noon at midnight, clocks that ticked and rang and counted out your worth. The rhythm broke, not because it was wrong, but because it didn't fit the pace of profit. Sleep became compressed, controlled, scheduled. The soft waking hour in the middle of the night, once a space for prayer, dreams, warmth, was cast aside. And when people continued to wake during that hour, they were told something was wrong with them. They were called insomniacs, told to medicate, to suppress, to conform. But the rhythm never truly left. It hid. It sank down into the cells, into blood and bone and breath. It waited beneath alarms and anxiety and white noise machines. And now, slowly, people are beginning to feel it again. Not because of books, not because of research, but because these are asking to be trusted again. They are beginning to listen. A man goes to sleep early and wakes at 2:15 a.m. He sits in silence for an hour, no longer afraid. A woman turns off her phone at dusk. She lights a single lamp and reads until her eyes close. Naturally, a child dreams before midnight, wakes to draw before dawn, and returns to bed without ever being told it's strange. These are not isolated moments. They are fragments of something larger, something older. A slow, quiet revival of the most human rhythm we have. Modern science is catching up. Studies now show that biphasic sleep may be more restorative, that our ancestors weren't wrong, they were in sync, that the time between first and second sleep was rich with prolactin, calm, clarity, that the body is still waiting for its space to breathe, and still, the world fights back. The pressure to hustle, to optimize, to outwork and outperform, it doesn't let go easily. But rebellion doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it's a dim room, a cup of warm milk, a refusal to answer an email at midnight, a conscious decision to sit in the dark and do nothing at all. These moments matter. Because history is not a line, it is a spiral, and what was once forgotten can be remembered again. Your story is not gone. It lives in those who slow down, who choose quiet, who wake in the middle of the night and feel no shame, who light a candle, who rest, not because they've earned it, but because they exist. You live in their rhythm, in every breath that doesn't rush, in every night that unfolds without a screen, in every moment of rest that feels undeserved and yet is taken anyway. This isn't about turning back the clock. No one is trading running water for thatched roofs. No one wants to revive the hardships of your time. But they want to recover something else, something you had without knowing it. A night that belongs to the body. A sleep that does not fear interruption. A world that knows how to stop. That is your gift to the future. Not a lesson. Not a moral. Just a memory. A living memory carried in bones and breath, waiting to be heard. Even now, someone is reading this and realizing for the first time that they are not broken. They are simply remembering. And with that memory comes something softer than instruction, more powerful than advice. Permission. Permission to rest. To wake without guilt. To sleep again. To trust again. and to truly know that they are part of a rhythm that has never been lost. Only quiet, only waiting, only now, beginning to hum again beneath the noise. You lie down once more. The fire has dwindled into a low amber glow, casting the faintest flicker on the uneven walls. Ash settles like a blanket over the last embers, a quiet hush of warmth beneath a layer of grey. It doesn't need to be bright anymore. It simply needs to be there. The dark is kind tonight. Not heavy, not looming, but soft. A gentle curtain pulled over the shoulders of the world. It muffles sharp edges. It swallows harsh noises. It invites only what is necessary. And what's necessary now is rest. Outside, the wind presses against the cottage walls, but it doesn't howl. It hums, a long, low lullaby, stitched from the sounds of branches swaying and thatch shifting. The night doesn't rush you. It doesn't prod or pull. It waits. And so do you. Your body, curled in wool and straw, finally begins to unclench. Joints that held tension like secrets start to soften. Fingers unfurl, shoulders melt a little lower into the shape of sleep. There is no urgency here, no expectation, just breath. The breath softens. Slow, deep, quiet. You begin to notice the air again, not just the act of inhaling it, but the feel of it. Damp, cold, a little sweet. The way it travels in, brushes against the back of your throat, rests in your chest, and then the slow sigh of letting it go again and again, until each breath becomes a rhythm, until the rhythm becomes a cradle. No ticking clocks. There is no second hand to chase, no deadlines hiding behind sunrise. Just time as it once was, circular, gentle, tied to the land and the moon. Time that bends and breathes with you. Time that doesn't punish or push. No glowing screens. No buzz of messages. No hum of electricity. Just the faint crackle of ember and the small night creaks of an old wooden beam settling into the cold. The darkness isn't empty, it's alive in its own quiet way. And you belong to it. No weight of doing. No checklists. No achievements. No need to be clever or kind or capable. You are not a project. You are not a task. You are a body, a breath, a heartbeat in the dark. That is enough. Only being. Here, being is sacred. Here, being is allowed. Thoughts try, at first, to keep speaking. A dozen unfinished sentences parade across your mind. Worries knock, faintly, on the inside of your ribs. But they are no longer convincing. Not tonight. You let them knock. You don't answer. The thoughts, slow. Not because you force them to, but because the space around you makes it safe to let them go. The stillness invites the mind to loosen its grip, to let a few things fall, to leave a few things unresolved. The rhythm returns. It's not just your breath now. It's the faint, slow rhythm of a world in rest. Somewhere beyond the walls there is a fox turning in its den, a child murmuring in sleep, a crow tucking its head beneath a wing. Even the soil dreams tonight, pulling frost into its roots like a blanket. And just like that, you sleep again. Not for productivity. Not for performance. Not to be better in the morning. Not to prove something. Not to earn your place. Just for the sake of rest. Because the body remembers a time when rest wasn't a reward, but a rhythm. When nightfall meant stillness, not scarcity. When to lie down was not to give up, but to return. To the self. To the quiet. To the pulse of the earth beneath you. And somewhere, in the hush between midnight and morning, the past exhales. The memories that once felt sharp soften at the edges. Not erased, only no longer urgent. Shadows of old conversations fade into the background. Faces blur. sounds drift. What hurts less. What lingered loosens. The future listens. Not with judgment, but curiosity. It doesn't knock or barge in. It waits in the wings, patient, a kind observer, rather than a looming storm. It knows there is time. It knows you will come to it when you're ready. But for now, it watches you sleep. And the rhythm continues. It carries you gently, deeper, into the dark. A rhythm older than clocks and calendars. The slow pulse of stars above, the breath of trees outside, the turning of soil, the quiet beat of your own heart, steady and safe. You are part of it. You have always been part of it. And tonight, in this stillness, you remember.